Sweeps? We don't need no stinking sweeps. Hey kids, and welcome to a brand new installment of Weekend Wankshop here with your good buddy, Uncle Ben. You know, usually whenever guitar players start talking about playing arpeggios, the first things our mind goes towards are sweeps, where we're just playing consecutive downstrokes or upstrokes, kind of raking through the strings there. And that's cool, but a lot of people do it. And a lot of people never explore the fact that there's lots of other ways to play arpeggios, such as using tapping, which is what I'm going to show you how to do today. This lick is based around an A minor 7 arpeggio, so you could use it over an A minor 7, or just a regular A minor or even an A power chord if you're just wanting to kind of expand that harmony a little bit. It sounds really cool in a rock or fusion kind of context. This lick is so sick it just might give you Ebola. But before we get into it, let's hear it again, this time at stepdad speed. Look Mom, no hairband. And of course you can find a full tab for this week's lick on my Instagram page, so be sure to head over to Instagram and look up BenEllerGuitars and find the tab for this week's lick. Upload a video of yourself tapping through it along with the hashtag Weekend Wankshop. Like I said a second ago, you can totally play this lick without the aid of a hairband on your strings to mute them out. So take that scrunchie and give it back to your sister and tell her I said hey. The real secret of how to mute this stuff out as you go through really lies in the right hand, which is something that we'll talk about towards the end of the video. First, let's check out what the shape of this guy is. So this is an A minor 7. There's a lot of different ways to look at that. You could look at it as an A minor arpeggio, which is ACE, plus the minor 7th, which is a G note. You could look at it as the 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th notes of the A minor scale. Whatever. A, C, E, G, A. That's all the notes that we're going to be playing throughout this entire lick. In the left hand, we're going to play those notes like this. We're going to play A, which is fret number 12 on the A string, and C, which is fret number 15 on the A string. On the G, we're going to have frets 12 and 14. That's G and A. So notice we skipped a string there. We skipped the D string. And then on the high E string here, we're going to have 12 and 15, which is E and G. So it kind of mirrors the same shape that you started off on. It's kind of an easy to see pattern for the left hand here. I see it just sort of this little blocky box. Now with the right hand, the notes E, C, and A are being played, which we can find here on the 19th fret A string, the 17th fret G string, that's a C note, and then the 17th fret high E string, which is our A note. So I guess you could say altogether what we're going to end up with here is in the left hand we're going to have 12 and 15, 19 with the right hand. The G string here we're going to have 12 and 14, 17 with the right hand. And then on the high E string here, we're going to have 12 and 15, 17 with the right hand over here. So all together. Now the way I phrase this is just to play up the entire arpeggio first. So again, 12, 15, 19, G string 12, 14, 17, high E string 12, 15, 17. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off to 15, pull off to 12. So basically I've gone up the arpeggio and then started descending down it. Next what I'm going to do is tap that 17th fret G string, pull off to 14, pull off to 12, and then end back on 14, which is a root note of the arpeggio there, A. So yeah, it's just basically walking up and down that main arpeggio shape I showed you there. Now the thing I get asked questions the most about licks like this are how to mute out every string as you play through it. Because if you're not careful with this kind of lick and your muting is not in check, every time you come off one of those strings it can generate a ton of noise, which is why most guys resort to using a hairband or something on the neck there. But if you work on your muting technique, you don't need that. Okay, here's the first thing to worry about. So whenever you're making a transfer from the right hand to the left hand, so in other words, like let's say the very first part of the lick where I go from the A string to the G string. Now if you're not careful, if both of those notes end up ringing out simultaneously like this, that's where things start getting really muddy and overtony and stuff. It's like you can't even hear this note because this note's still ringing out. We're going to try to do this really slowly and kind of exaggerate the motions a little bit, but what you'll notice is that I'm holding this note down until the very apex of when I hit this one. See how it kind of came off a little bit? That's even a good thing to practice, just going back and forth between those two notes. Making sure to let this guy loose the nanosecond that this finger strikes down. It's kind of like you never have both fingers mashing at the same time, ever. And probably the most important aspect of all this too here is the right hand muting that's coming from the inside of the palm here. If you play this lick with your hand kind of floating above the strings like this, there's just absolutely no way you'll ever get it to sound clean, because basically this hand needs to be muting those strings out as we go through them, muting above the fretted note. That's one of those things I always tell my students. Whatever string it is you're playing, like if you're playing the G string, the hand back here should be muting all the strings above it. You know? So whatever string is in play, the right hand over here is always just using the inside of the palm here, and even the inside of the forearm a little bit, and even this area in some cases, kind of the chicken leg portion of the thumb there, to mute out all the strings above the one that you're playing. So that means as I go through this, whenever I start the arpeggio, I'm playing the A string, right? Well, back here in my palm, if I was to hit the low E, that's what the low E sounds like. It's just being muted back here by the back side of my palm. Now the second portion of the lick is on the G string, right? As soon as I transfer to that G string, I'm now muting the bottom three strings back here with my palm. So I went from sitting just on the E string to suddenly muting across all three of these. Sometimes as you play this stuff or watch people play through these things, you'll even see the strings kind of moving a little bit. See how they're kind of wobbling like that? Just where the inside of this hand is rubbing up against those strings. Really common to see that kind of thing happening. And again, yeah, it makes a little noise, but the notes that you're playing are going to be louder than that noise, so you never hear it. So again, I'm going from muting the 6th string to muting the 6, 5, and 4 strings. And then when I'm down here on the high E, I'm muting out everything except for the high E string. Again, there's sort of an X-ray vision look at that right there. I can feel the low E string touching the inside of my forearm. Meanwhile, the B string and G string are very firmly in my palm back here. Again, being muted out. That way they won't generate noise and stuff like that. That's really the big key. And then whenever you're coming back up through the arpeggio, pretty much what you got to do is uncover those strings as you go along through there. Now what's keeping the high E string from ringing out is the left hand pointer finger. So whenever I'm making this exchange, do you notice how my pointer finger here is very flat? It's not arched up, it's not this. See, when I arch up, now you can hear the E string ringing out, right? We don't want that. We want that E string muted out as we come off of it like this. And the only way to make that happen is by keeping this pointer finger very flat. So that way whenever I come off of that note, I'm just dampening that string out. See that? It's not me coming off. It's me just laying across the string, not really pushing down on it. That way it mutes it. So there you go, guys, a cool tapped arpeggio shape. You could easily move that to any other key too. Just move that entire sort of pattern to maybe starting off on E, or maybe starting off on a B or something like that to suit whatever key it is that you're playing in. Those muting concepts that we talked about progressively covering and uncovering the strings and keeping the pointer finger here on the left hand really flat as you uncover the strings from the top, those are all things that aren't just important for tapped arpeggios either. These are concepts that I use while I'm flying through, scalar licks, anything ripping, anything at all, period. I'm constantly utilizing both of those muting techniques to make whatever it is that I'm playing sound clean. So be sure to practice those in everything that you do. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel, as well as follow me on Instagram and Twitter at BenEllerGuitars. If you're interested in hooking up for some one-on-one Skype lessons with me, be sure to drop me an email, BenEllerGuitars@gmail.com. We'll talk about rates and times, and the nasty boys, and all kinds of good stuff. Stay tuned for another sick lick next week. Thanks again, guys. Cheers.